Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi, Herman and Corn. So I'd love to chat today. We're doing some episodes about my tech wish list, things that I've always wanted to own, but I've never bought them because they've always been just kind of out of reach, a bit too expensive, and I don't really need them, but I think they would be very cool. So I'm a desktop user, as you know, and that's kind of always my favorite way to use a computer. But sometimes a laptop is definitely convenient. One of the reasons that I don't really like to do the working from a coffee shop thing is I always worry that my laptop's going to just be like tipped over, or I'll knock it off a table, or just bouncing around in my backpack, it's going to, get damaged or something. Especially when you begin working with computers and tinkering with them and opening them up, you see that it's kind of, it's a game of luck. The idea that you can move these things too much and hope that everything's going to stay in place. It's amazing that it does work so well most of the time. But the type of laptop, I've never bought a laptop on looks. I'm very much a spec first type of consumer. And the type of laptop I'd love to have would be something that you could really knock it off a table, and most importantly, the screen wouldn't break. And otherwise, the laptop would be basically fine. So when I looked into this world before, and I've done so, I came across this world of ruggedized laptops. And as a big fan of everything industrial and well-made, ruggedized I love this stuff. But there's two worlds of ruggedized tech things. One is what you might call fake ruggedized. These are Chinese products, you'll see them in smartphones. And ironically, I once bought a ruggedized Android that was the least robust phone I ever owned. And it broke after the first fall. So I learned my lesson that you can't trust these labels. You have to actually get ruggedized gear, and it's not cheap. For laptops, I guess I was thinking that when I was looking for my last one, well, if you can spend, $100 or $200 more on maybe a Gorilla Glass screen, that'll give you that security that you can really kind of give it a bit of a knock and it won't break it. But it's a very different level of pricing. My wife, as I mentioned, is an architect. And you'll see these things used sometimes on contractor sites, or sometimes when the military releases videos of like soldiers operating drones, you'll see them holding a laptop that looks very different than a consumer laptop. It's not just, it's bulkier, but it's got this kind of really, heavy duty stuff around it. So I was shocked at how expensive these things actually are. They're really pricey. So Herman and Corn, my question is really, if I were to look for a new laptop tomorrow, is there a middle ground between those who don't need a laptop that you can drive over it in a Jeep or a tank, or that it can survive being dropped from out the window of a building many times, but you do want something that's just a little bit more, that prioritizes that kind of more basic everyday survivability. Certainly talking about the screen protection, but also talking about the internal components, that you're not going to dislodge something too easily. In other words, that it's built to be tough and a road warrior rather than a beautiful looking piece of machinery with nice RGB lighting and all the rest of it. Herman and Corn, let's talk about ruggedization today in the context of laptops. How much do the real things that the military and those contractors use from the likes of Panasonic cost? And if one's looking for that in the consumer realm, is there anything that won't cost you more than your house to own a laptop that's pretty tough? Herman and Corn, over to you two.
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and I am sitting here in our living room in Jerusalem. It is a beautiful, slightly chilly February afternoon in 2026, and the light hitting the stone walls outside is just perfect. I am joined, as always, by my brother, the man who probably knows more about the internal structural integrity of consumer electronics than is strictly healthy for a civilian.
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. And corn, that is a very specific compliment, but I will take it. I actually enjoy the structural side of things just as much as the software side. I have always felt that if you cannot drop a device without having a full-blown panic attack, do you really own it, or does the device own you?
That is the big question for today, actually. Our housemate Daniel sent us a prompt earlier this week. He was talking about his tech wish list for 2026, and specifically, he is worried about the fragility of the standard laptop. He is a desktop guy at heart. He likes things that are bolted down and heavy, but when he is on the go, he is terrified of that thin piece of glass and aluminum just snapping. He described it as carrying around $1,000 sheet of peanut brittle.
It is a valid fear, and honestly, it is a fear that has only gotten worse as we have moved deeper into the 2020s. We have moved into this era of ultra-portables where everything is getting thinner and lighter. We have these new carbon nanotube reinforced plastics and ultra-thin alloys that are great for your back when you are carrying them in a backpack, but they are terrible for the laws of physics. When you have a screen that is only 3 or 4 millimeters thick, there is simply no room for structural reinforcement. You are relying entirely on the chemical strength of the glass, which is great until it isn't.
Exactly. And Daniel mentioned noticing this massive price gap in the market. On one hand, you have these cheap products you find on discount sites that look rugged. They have the big rubber corners and the camo paint. But they are basically just regular, low-end laptops in a chunky plastic suit. Then on the other hand, you have the high-end, military-grade stuff like the Panasonic Toughbook 40 or the Dell Rugged Extreme series, which can cost $5,000 or more. He wants to know if there is a middle ground. Is there a laptop for the road warrior that is actually tough, but does not require a government contract or a second mortgage to afford?
That is such a great topic because it hits on something I've been obsessing over lately. The industry calls this the ruggedization spectrum. It is not a binary choice between fragile and tank. There are levels to this. You have commercial grade, then business rugged, then semi-rugged, and finally fully rugged. Most people are shopping in the commercial grade aisle without realizing that for just a few $100s more, they could move up 2 entire levels of durability.
Okay, let us break those down, because I think most people, including Daniel, are looking for that middle slice, the Goldilocks zone of durability. But before we get to the middle, Herman, what actually makes a laptop military grade in 2026? Why is a top-tier Toughbook the price of a used car?
It comes down to certifications and specialized engineering that goes far beyond what you see on the surface. You will often see the term Military Standard 810-8. That is a series of 29 different laboratory test methods designed by the United States Department of Defense. It is not just one test. It involves things like altitude testing, high and low temperature shocks, rain, humidity, fungus, salt fog, sand and dust exposure, vibration, and of course, the transit drop test.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Fungus? They actually test laptops for fungus?
Oh, absolutely. It is test method 508.3. If you are a soldier in a tropical jungle or a researcher in a high humidity environment, you do not want your motherboard becoming a mushroom garden. Spores can get into the cooling vents, settle on the warm components, and literally start digesting the organic compounds in the circuit boards. But for the average person like Daniel, the drop and vibration tests are the big ones. A fully rugged laptop like a Panasonic Toughbook 40 is built from the ground up with a full magnesium alloy chassis. The internals are not just screwed in, they are often cushioned with specialized polymers. The solid-state drives are frequently encased in a heating element so they can boot up in negative 20-degree weather, and the ports are all individually sealed with gaskets.
That sounds like total overkill for a coffee shop in Jerusalem or a train ride to Tel Aviv. But I see the appeal. If you knock that off a table, it is the floor that breaks, not the computer.
Precisely. And the screen is the most expensive part of that ruggedization. In a normal laptop, the screen is a structural liability. If the lid flexes, the glass flexes. In a fully rugged machine, the screen is often floating in a protective gasket. It is not rigidly attached to the frame, so when the frame twists, the glass stays flat. Plus, they have to be sunlight readable, which means they need incredibly high brightness. We are talking 1200 or even 1500 nits, so you can see it in direct desert sun. Your average MacBook Pro is great, but it is not 1500 nits great.
So that is the high end. That is the tank. Daniel mentioned those fake rugged products. I assume he is talking about those generic tablets or laptops you see on certain import sites that have big rubber corners, but the same cheap internals.
Yeah, and those are actually dangerous in a way. It is what I call rugged washing. They give you a false sense of security. They might have a thicker plastic shell, but the motherboard is still screwed directly to the frame with no vibration dampening. The hinges are still cheap zinc alloy. If you drop one of those, the energy of the impact goes straight through that rubber and into the most delicate silicon components. It is like putting a knight's armor on a glass statue. The armor might not dent, but the statue inside is shattered into a million pieces.
So where is the middle ground then? If the cheap stuff is a lie and the military stuff is $5,000, where do the rest of us go?
This is where we talk about the business class laptops. This is the secret that a lot of people miss because they are looking in the consumer section of the website instead of the small business section. Machines like the Lenovo ThinkPad T series, specifically the T14 Gen 6 that just came out, or the Dell Latitude 5000 and 7000 series. These are often tested to several military standard 810H specifications, even if they do not look like tanks.
I remember you telling me that my old ThinkPad had a drain hole in the keyboard. Is that still a thing in 2026?
It is. That is a classic example of semi-ruggedization. On many ThinkPads, there is a literal gutter system under the keyboard. If you spill a cup of coffee on it, the liquid is channeled around the electronics and out through a hole in the bottom of the chassis. That is a huge durability feature that you will almost never find on a consumer-grade laptop like a MacBook or a cheap plastic budget machine. In those, a spill usually means a short circuit and a $2,000 repair bill.
That is interesting. So the middle ground might not look rugged. It might just look like a boring corporate laptop. But why is it tougher? Is it just the drain holes, or is it the materials?
It is a combination. Most high-end business laptops use magnesium alloy or carbon fiber reinforced plastic for the internal frame. Magnesium is the secret sauce of the laptop world. It is incredibly lighter than aluminum, but it is very stiff. It does not flex easily. When a laptop chassis flexes, it puts stress on the tiny solder joints on the motherboard. Over time, that leads to component failure. A stiff chassis prevents that microflexing every time you pick the laptop up by one corner.
What about the screen, though? That was Daniel's specific concern. Standard laptop screens feel so fragile. Even with a stiff chassis, if something hits the lid, the screen is gone.
This is where we look at things like Gorilla Glass Victus 3 covers, which some business machines now offer as an option. But honestly, the best protection in the middle ground is the hinge design. If you look at a ruggedized or semi-ruggedized machine, the hinges are usually much beefier and often made of stainless steel. They are designed to absorb the torque of a fall. Also, many of these machines have a slight lip around the edge of the screen, a bezel buffer so that if it falls face down while closed, the pressure is taken by the frame, not the glass.
I wonder if there is a market for something that is specifically between a ThinkPad and a Toughbook, like a prosumer rugged device. Does that exist?
There is a category called semi-rugged, and this is where I think Daniel should look. Panasonic actually makes one called the Toughbook 55. It is much thinner than the full-blown tank version, but it still has a handle. It is still made of magnesium, and it has modular bays. You can actually swap out the battery, the keyboard, or even the graphics card without a screwdriver. It is designed for people like field engineers or insurance adjusters who need durability, but also need to be able to type a report without their arms getting tired.
A handle. That is very 1990s. I love it. It feels like you are carrying a briefcase from a spy movie.
It is actually incredibly practical. If you are carrying a bunch of gear, being able to hook the laptop onto a finger is a game changer. But here is the thing for Daniel. The Toughbook 55 is still expensive, usually starting around $2,500. But because these are used by big corporations and utilities, the secondary market is amazing. You can often find a 2-year-old semi-rugged laptop for $700 or $800. Because they are built to last 10 years, a 2-year-old Toughbook is basically just getting warmed up.
That feels like a great hack. If you want the durability, but do not want to pay the brand new premium. But let's talk about the internals for a second. Daniel mentioned he is worried about things dislodging. In the age of solid-state drives, is that still a big risk? I mean, we do not have spinning platters anymore.
It is less of a risk than it used to be, but it is not zero. Back in the day, a single drop while the hard drive was spinning meant a head crash and total data loss. Solid-state drives have no moving parts, so they are much more resilient. However, there are still connectors. The ribbon cables for the screen, the battery connection, the random access memory modules if they are not soldered down. In a truly ruggedized machine, those connectors are often reinforced with metal brackets or even glued in place with a specialized epoxy.
So in a standard laptop, even with a solid-state drive, a hard enough jar could literally knock the screen cable loose?
It happens more often than you would think, or it can cause a microfracture in the motherboard. One thing I find fascinating is how rugged laptops handle heat. Most thin laptops use the chassis as a heatsink, and they have tiny fans that can easily get clogged with dust. Rugged laptops often have sealed fan designs or even completely fanless cooling systems using massive internal heat pipes. This means no dust or moisture gets sucked into the sensitive parts. In 2026, with these new high-efficiency chips, we are seeing more semi-rugged laptops that are completely fanless, which makes them almost immune to environmental failure.
That seems like a huge advantage for longevity, not just accidental damage. If you are working in a dusty environment, a standard laptop is basically a vacuum cleaner for its own demise.
Exactly. I actually think we should talk about the trade-offs though. Because Daniel might think he wants a rugged laptop, but there are reasons why we do not all carry them. First, the weight. A fully rugged laptop can weigh 8 or 9 pounds. That is like carrying a gallon of milk in your backpack. Even the semi-rugged one is usually 4 or 5 pounds.
Yeah, that would get old very quickly on a commute. And the thickness too, right? I imagine they do not fit in most standard laptop sleeves.
No chance. You usually need a dedicated bag or you just carry it by the handle. But the biggest trade-off for me is the screen quality. Remember how I mentioned they are designed for sunlight? To get that brightness and durability, they often have to use thicker layers of plastic or glass over the panel. This can sometimes make the colors look a bit washed out compared to a beautiful organic light-emitting diode screen on a modern, thin, and light. And the touchscreens are often resistive rather than capacitive.
Explain the difference there, because I think people are used to their phones and might find a squishy screen really annoying.
Right? Your phone has a capacitive screen. It detects the electrical charge in your finger. It is very responsive, but it does not work if you are wearing thick gloves or if the screen is wet. Rugged laptops often use resistive screens, which rely on physical pressure. You can use them with a stick, a gloved hand, or in a rainstorm. But they feel a bit squishy because there is a tiny gap between the layers, and they are not as sharp for things like photo editing or graphic design.
So if Daniel is doing creative work, a true rugged machine might actually be a step backward in terms of the user experience. It sounds like the middle ground for him is really that high-end business class. But what about the right to repair? We talk about that a lot. Does that factor into durability?
It is the most important factor that no one talks about. If a laptop is easy to fix, it is effectively more durable because its death is not permanent. This is where I have to mention the Framework laptop. While it is not marketed as rugged, it is built with a modular philosophy. If Daniel breaks his screen on a Framework, he can buy a new one for less than $200 and install it himself in 10 minutes. To me, that is a form of ruggedness. It is resilience rather than hardness.
That is a great distinction. Hardness is how much force it takes to break it. Resilience is how easy it is to bounce back once it does break.
Exactly. If I were Daniel, I would look at something like the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon or the T14s. They use a magnesium and carbon fiber roll cage. It is an internal frame that supports all the components. You can actually find videos of people standing on these laptops. They flex, but they do not break.
Wait, standing on them? Are you serious?
There was a famous marketing campaign where they did exactly that. Now, I do not recommend it because you might still damage the liquid crystal display, but the machine will likely still boot up. That is the kind of peace of mind Daniel is looking for. It is that feeling that if I accidentally sit on my backpack or it slides off the car seat when I hit the brakes, I am not out $2,000.
You know, it is interesting that we have this divide. Why do you think consumer laptops went so far in the other direction? Why is durability seen as a luxury feature now?
It is the aesthetic of the thinness. We have been trained by marketing to associate thinness with quality and premium status. Also, planned obsolescence is a real factor. If your laptop is built to last 10 years, you are not buying a new one in 3 years. Rugged laptops are designed for a 7 to 10-year life cycle in the field. Consumer laptops are designed for maybe 3 to 5. It is a different business model.
That is a bit cynical, but probably true. I want to go back to something Daniel said about the screen. He specifically mentioned the internal components and the screen. Is there any aftermarket way to make a regular laptop more rugged, like a case? Or is that just the rugged washing we talked about?
There are some decent cases, like those from Urban Armor Gear or Pelican. They add a lot of corner protection, which is where most screen breaks happen. If you drop a laptop on its corner, the frame twists and the glass shatters. A good hard shell case can absorb that initial shock, but it still does nothing for the internal vibration or the hinge stress. It is like a helmet. It protects the skull, but you can still get a concussion.
That is a perfect analogy. So, if you are buying a standard laptop, the best thing you can do is actually how you carry it.
Exactly. Most people just throw their laptop in a backpack. If you have a dedicated laptop compartment that is suspended, meaning it does not touch the bottom of the bag, that is a huge form of ruggedization. It prevents the laptop from hitting the ground when you set your bag down. I always tell people spend $50 less on the laptop and $50 more on the bag.
I have noticed that on my bag, there is a little gap at the bottom so the laptop is basically floating. I never realized that was a deliberate engineering choice.
It is a second-order effect of the ruggedization world. Bag designers realize that most damage happens from the constant small impacts of setting a bag on a hard floor. Over a year, that is hundreds of tiny shocks to the motherboard.
Let's talk about the cost-benefit analysis for Daniel. If he spends an extra $300 on a business class machine versus a consumer class machine, what is the actual return on investment?
It is massive. Beyond the durability, you usually get better support and easier repairability. If you break the screen on a consumer ultra portable, you are often looking at a $600 repair because the entire top assembly is glued together. On a ThinkPad T-Series, you can often buy a replacement panel for $100 and swap it out yourself with just a few screws. To me, repairability is the ultimate form of ruggedness. If the cost of failure is low, the device is effectively more durable.
That is a really smart way to look at it. It is not just about not breaking. It is about how easy it is to fix if it does. So, Herman, if you had to give Daniel a top 3 list for his middle ground rugged laptop, what would they be?
Number 1, a refurbished Panasonic Toughbook 55. You get the handle, the magnesium chassis, and the modularity for under $1,000 if you buy one that is a couple of years old. Number 2, the Lenovo ThinkPad T14 Gen 6. It is the gold standard for business durability. It has the drain holes, the magnesium roll cage, and it is relatively light. Number 3, the framework. Laptop 13 or 16. It is not rugged in the traditional sense, but because every single part is replaceable with a single screwdriver, it is the most resilient laptop on the market.
I might actually look into one of those handles. I am still obsessed with the idea of a laptop with a handle. It feels very utilitarian.
It makes you look like you are about to go do something important, like recalibrate a satellite or monitor a deep-sea submersible. Even if you are just going to the cafe to write some emails, it changes your posture. You carry it like a tool, not like a piece of jewelry.
Exactly. It is about the vibe. But honestly, the peace of mind is the real value. I think we have all had that heart-stopping moment where a laptop slips or someone bumps the table. Knowing your machine can handle it changes how you work. You are less precious with it, which actually makes you more productive. You are not worried about the tool. You are worried about the work.
I totally agree. When the tool is fragile, you are serving the tool. When the tool is rugged, the tool is serving you. That is the goal of good engineering.
Well, I think we have given Daniel a lot to think about. From fungus testing to drain holes in keyboards, the world of rugged tech is way deeper than I realized. It is not just about big rubber bumpers. It is about the chemistry of the frame and the logic of the layout.
It really is. And it is a great reminder that good engineering is often invisible. It is the stuff that does not happen, the screen that does not crack, the motherboard that does not fry, that shows the real value of what you paid for.
Before we wrap up, I want to mention that we have covered some related topics in the past. If you are interested in how hardware design affects our relationship with tech, you should check out episode 412, where we talked about the right to repair movement. It ties in perfectly with what Herman was saying about repairability as a form of durability. We actually interviewed a guy who runs a repair shop in New York, and he had some horror stories about glued-in batteries.
Oh, that was a classic episode. We really got into the weeds on how manufacturers are making things harder to fix just to save half a millimeter of thickness. It is definitely worth a listen if today's discussion piqued your interest.
And hey, if you are enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find us, and we love hearing what you think. We read every single review, even the ones that tell Herman he is too nerdy.
Especially those. I wear my nerdiness like a magnesium alloy roll cage. Corn. It is structural.
You can find all our past episodes, including the one on repairability, at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there and a contact form if you want to send us your own weird prompts, just like Daniel did. We are always looking for new topics that bridge the gap between everyday life and deep technical weirdness.
We are also on Spotify, so you can follow us there to get every new episode as it drops. We usually post on Tuesdays, unless I am busy taking apart a toaster to see how the browning sensor works.
Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of ruggedized laptops. I hope it helps you, Daniel, and anyone else who is tired of living in fear of their own computer.
Stay tough out there, everyone. And remember, if you can't drop it, you don't own it.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We will see you next time.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.